Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hello, this is Harrison Wolf, and I'm excited to introduce our podcast, Technically Friends, with my co-host, Timothy Reuter. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us once again, for subscribing to this podcast on whatever platform you use, and I look forward to further conversations and introducing my colleagues and I. Here to talk with one of my closest friends, a former roommate, somebody who, I've always wanted to start a company with, and I'm glad he's doing that now and has done that now, 2 or 3 times, so we can get all the kinks out and we can find that path forward when we find the right product. I think that's what we've always wanted. We know the right people, have great networks, but it's always, you need something to sell. You need something to make. You need something that will change the world, which is exciting because I think we're going to hear from you about what that is that you're working on now. And Chris is in the deep heart of Silicon Valley, living in Mountain View. We've known each other for about 15 years. A friend of a friend introduced us that I went to college with, and we quickly connected over robotics, science fiction, video games, politics. And I just wanted to share one quick story. I don't think Timothy knows this, and Chris isn't prepared for this, but one of my favorite phases in life, right? I think we all deal in phases. I'm in a season of my life where I've got 2 little kids, and a lot of my focus is on that. And Chris, you have 2 little kids, and Timothy, you've got 3 kids, one of which is still very little.
Yes.
And so, when Chris and I were living together, this was a different phase of our lives. We had enough bedrooms in our apartment where we had one extra. And rather than finding a roommate, we were able to create a LAN party room where we all had our computers and we would play StarCraft 2 tournaments on the weekends against each other or cooperatively online. And those were very much the good old days in my mind. And the last thing I'll say is actually getting down to brass tacks, which is Chris is a 2-time founder of robotics companies at UCR now and Novium before. And he led the design and development of robotic hardware for both. He's a founder fellow at the South Park Commons. And I really think I can sum up his vision of making robotics as something to help humans achieve things more productively and safer, to make our lives better rather than replace us. Is that fair to say, Chris?
That's fair to say. Let me just say thank you for inviting me on the show.
Absolutely. And last thing I'll say is you're the father of 2 little ones, a husband to another close friend of mine who also is a founder of a company, but more in the AI space and interacting with physical environments. And I hope to have her on sometime to talk with. And maybe we can compare some of your answers and see what jives. But 2 founders, 2 kids, 1 house. Chris, let's jump into it if that works for you.
Let's do it.
And to kick things off, why don't we start by hearing a little bit about what is under control robotics? What's the vision for it?
Sure. We're building rugged robots, humanoid robots, multi-purpose tools for heavy industry. Things where people get hurt, things where people are under physical stress, and tasks that quite frankly people just don't want to do. And so we can take the sort of the drudgery out of our relation to physical labor.
And what's an example of one of those jobs? I mean, I think I hear in the drone space for a long time, it was dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs, but it sounds like a similar kind of approach. But what's a good example of one specific job that you envision your robots working on?
Yeah. So I really like to think there used to be 3Ds, but really everyone was missing the 4th one, which was the distant or the remote jobs that are off on the North Slope in Alaska or out in the middle of the ocean, things like that. So, but in the near term, we're talking about entering into industries like construction or mining, things where you have skilled workers doing legitimately interesting and skilled jobs. But they spend more than half their time either looking for tools, waiting for materials, really sort of participating in the logistics of a construction site instead of the actual construction of the construction site.
Mm.
And so by utilizing autonomous systems that can handle materials the same way that a person can, we can really eliminate all of that sort of lost downtime during the day so that we can make skilled welders twice as productive. We can make carpenters twice as productive throughout their day.
And what made you want to start your own company rather than join an existing team?
That's a great question. I've both joined existing amazing teams and sort of started my own. And to be honest, when I was looking for my next gig, I met up with one of my current co-founders, and I told them I'm looking to found or find a high performance robotics startup where we're focused on really sort of taking the latest advances in AI and pairing that with high performance hardware that can actually do the job, where mobility is the number one criteria to be useful. And we sort of looked at each other. We're like, yeah, okay, let's just do it.
That's awesome. I guess one of the questions I always have when it comes to robotics is, what is that piece that is missing, right? Like, why haven't we seen robots everywhere already? Like, we've been talking about robots for a long time. We've been talking about, co-robotics. You and I have worked on co-robotic program plans in the past. In drones, it's the batteries often, right? The batteries are a limiting factor in many operations, the need to go longer, faster, to fly lighter. I guess for you, like, what's the thing holding back the robotic space? And also, if you just had endless money, time, and the right people, what would be the problem you'd want to attack with UCR?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. Like, what is the problem that I want to attack? And that's the problem that we're going after right now, which is making like inherently useful tools that fit in the same place that you or I do, and that is able to make lives better and safer. So we can have sort of a more productive world where we can get rid of housing shortages, where we can have the infrastructure that we deserve in this country and worldwide. The world is facing a lot of change, and there's going to be a lot of construction and change to the infrastructure for us to live the lives that we all want and deserve. Yeah. What was the first part of the question again?
That's fine. I think that was a great answer. I think, one thing that I think would be more interesting to hear you talk about really is, how you see the world today, in terms of your own personal beliefs. Like, how have you been challenged by the world today to do interesting things using your skill set? I think that's something that, as engineers, as policy people, we have to deal with if we want to make the positive change in our lives.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I've always just searched out interesting and challenging projects, and then lucked out in that I found interesting and talented people with which to tackle those projects with. And so I'd say more than anything, it's been, as much luck as it has been like some like master plan of let's build systems that are useful, whether it's for the future of space travel or for the future of warehouses. I've just stumbled onto teams or into problems that were both interesting, challenging, and for the most part meaningful.
And you mentioned in your pitch for your explanation of UCR applying AI. And obviously we're in a time of AI revolution, but that's mainly focused on large language models. So
Mm-hmm.
does the current moment with LLMs translate into an AI revolution for robotics, or is that a different pathway?
No, it does. It does. LLMs are part of the solution, or whatever replace LLMs as sort of the user interface. I think going back to Harrison's first question of like, why now? Like, why don't we see robots out in the world? I mean, if we step back, robotic hardware has, I think has been capable enough for the last 10 or 15 years from a physical standpoint, from being able to be small enough, batteries capable enough, joints strong enough, sensors high enough resolution to actually do sort of useful, if not the most dexterous work, but useful physical labor. The difference between now and 10 years ago is twofold. The most important of which is the user interface. I've been on teams that made incredibly capable robots, but our controls team and quite frankly, the user interface, you had to have a PhD in order to make the robot do one thing useful. And if you wanted to do another thing useful, well, then you had to spend 3 months, or 6 months figuring out how to do that thing. It wasn't scalable at all, and it wasn't useful to people outside of like an academic or a research lab environment. So LLMs sort of bring us to a point where we can envision the user interface being much more sort of egalitarian, in that a person without extensive training can work with a robot in a way that is not direct teleoperation. And so we're going to need to go beyond the current state of the art with LLMs to really sort of bring those capabilities and that flexibility out. But yeah, AI is a major part of that. And I'll just say the other part of this is the cost of building a similarly capable robot from like 10 years ago to today. It has dropped at least an order of magnitude, if not more. That's due to all of the work that people have done to develop sensors for either drones or autonomous vehicles. And that push, outside of the robotic actuator space has made suddenly things very, very affordable.
That's really, really interesting. And as we move through sort of this evolution that you're sort of describing, where do you see sort of the future of robotics heading? I think one of the things that I'm always thinking about is that, we've read similar books, we've watched similar movies. There's a show that just came out called Murderbot, right? Is about basically a sentient security robot that is able to hack its own programming and become sort of a free robot without people knowing. Spoiler alert. Or we've read Robopocalypse, or we watched Terminator.
You're
Right?
supposed to say the spoiler alert before you give the spoiler,
My
just
bad.
for future
Yeah.
reference.
So I guess for you, are you ever thinking about that? Are you thinking about your place in the evolution of robotics? Do you see a divergent future? How do you think of your role when it comes to, are we creating the robots that are T1000, or are we creating a future state of universal basic income that makes our lives all better?
I think it's the latter. It's hard to draw a line to sentience from the current work in AI. I find that hard to believe. The current work in AI and LLMs is really just a fancy way of doing statistics, and generating sort of what would be common sense, right? And so trying to tie sentience to that, I think, is a leap I'm not currently willing to make.
Okay.
Is that not what the human brain is doing?
I was thinking the same thing, right? Aren't we just a meat computer doing statistics?
I mean, that's a great question. So, there's certainly some sort of biological switches going on up there, but I'm not
We'll have to have a
brain.
neuroscientist on
Yeah.
to answer this question.
Yeah, exactly. So to get back to your question, yeah, I think that we're driving towards a future where people will have incredibly powerful tools. And in my opinion, we should make sure that the guardrails are there so that these tools are made for the benefit of the wider population rather than because it's certainly possible. Once we have incredibly flexible and capable machines that sort of exponentially increase an individual's or a company's or a country's ability to have economic output, we want to make sure that is not in the the sole control of a small group, that is more democratized. And I think you do that by lowering the cost, by making them easy to operate and integrate into existing processes.
I think that answer is really interesting. And I just finished the book The Optimist, which is the biography of Sam Altman and the founding of OpenAI. And that was the impetus originally for the founding of OpenAI, where Elon Musk didn't want Google to control the future of AI, so he gave a bunch of money to Altman to found this. But the challenge I think has been that you need so much money to create these things that you get sucked back into this dynamic of concentrated power and wealth. So this may be beyond the purview of sort of what you're thinking about at UCR, but how do you escape from needing large sums of money to create large scale smart robots and yet not having it succumb to capitalist dynamics of concentration?
Yeah, I think that will be a challenge for all of us moving forward. Let me just say that we raised 400K and operated for 6 months on that initial capital, and created a system that was meeting the best mobility systems out there today. Like the promise of AI and sort of current design tools is that it really has democratized your ability to create. So if you're willing to go out and take and spend the energy to create, I think that our story will not be unique, and that we've been able to do it on sort of, you know, well, 400K is a lot of money to an individual. In many cases, it is not a lot of money to a small business, or to a large business. And so I just think that that activation capital is going to continue to drop. As all these tools, you look at, and I'll take the example of like DeepSeek or other tools like this, in that the cost of doing it the first time is astronomical. Like, I cannot imagine developing our own LLM on a shoestring budget. But the follow on, once you know what the target is, like, it's so much easier to be the second or the third in many of these cases.
That actually leads to a question I had. So I've been the founder of two failed robotics companies. And one of the questions we always got as we were fundraising is, why did we think we could do something that a Google or a better funded robotics startup like Boston Dynamics or Figure couldn't? So what's your answer to that?
I think that there's a lot of room for players when you're talking about robots as flexible systems and flexible tools. And so some of the differentiation that's going to happen is going to be in focus. And our team is laser focused on making sure that we have the best mobility, that our systems really are mobile manipulators, not static manipulators that most of these systems end up being. That we are laser focused on being able to go anywhere, and then eventually, help do anything. But here initially, we can climb stairs, we can go over go over them sideways, go up ramps backwards, all sort of. Some of these tasks can be done blind. Like, we have just ripped out all, found all the dumb requirements and ripped them out when making humanoids. And like, I would love to have the problem of having too much capital to throw every single sensor and every single thing inside of a human form factor. But that's really not what we're concerned with. We are concerned with being able to fit in tight spaces, and then to be able to do useful work, not to make it look like a person.
Well, since we're on the topic of getting funding, and, first of all, congratulations. It's a hard thing to do, right? I think from the outside looking in, you've been able to achieve something with your founders, with your team. I mean, it's a whole village that takes this, with your spouse, everybody supporting, that few can achieve. Launching a hardware-driven startup that gets funding. Could you take us through some of those, like, a couple moments, maybe a moment that you look back on as like, as really as a high point, maybe something that was really hard to achieve, and then something that surprised you throughout this process?
Poof. Those are great questions. I mean, the biggest takeaway is that it's a grind. I'm privileged to have 3 other co-founders. We're all technical. We're all like highly energetic, type A. We want to we want to go solve the problem, go make it happen. Like there's no sitting back and waiting for someone else to take care of it. There's there so many meetings, so many drafts of how can we tell our story better? How can we be more clear on what we're trying to do, and also like while that story is also evolving, you know. We weren't 100% sure that heavy industry and construction in particular was the right place for us. Like everyone else in this space that's trying to build flexible systems, we're like, where can we throw robots? A lot of them, and it looked like warehouses is where you should start. It's where everyone else should start, or seems to be starting. So we're like, hey, let's do that. And it really came down to, like, we were trying to make the business case, and to Tim's point, how to differentiate ourselves from all of these well-capitalized systems that are either going into warehouses or homes. And the disconnect in our brain was that, like, seems like a very difficult place to start. Like there aren't explicit regulations, but there's implicit sort of regulations, and that I don't want to step on a dog or a baby or other things like this, that the cost of not being 100% safe is like astronomical. And so sort of realizing that we had to craft our own story, and the importance of sort of crafting our own story, led us to be like, all right, let's just not focus on these other things. And construction and heavy industry, I mean, there are challenges here too, and in the way that construction in particular, the business model, and sort of some of the challenges in construction, are achingly, like it's like you want to sprint, but you really have to like walk first with customers. When you're sort of creating new capabilities, you're like, I see this end point of, robots handling all of your on-site logistics, and then really skilled tradespeople doing the sort of the fun, awesome work. Um, uh, uh, and but there's the disconnect and the gap in getting to that future.
Okay, awesome.
I think we can all agree that robots stepping on babies is bad. Early on in your career, you worked for NASA, I think directly, and then for the NASA contractor, JPL. How is working on robotics in a government context different from doing so in a private sector context?
That how is it different? I mean, to a large degree, I mean, physics is physics, and mechanical engineering is mechanical engineering. It's like the actual engineering is not that different. I guess, like, maybe at a place like JPL, you have to there's like a very formal justification process for engineering decisions, and in designing, at least while we're doing prototypes, there is less formal, like, technical justification for each individual decision. There's more of like, you have a business justification for either the cost of the system or the capability. Like, what is the delta in the capability? Where it was never a question at JPL, like what the different cost would be to make it, I don't know, to make it smaller, or to have this sensor or not. We had already done the proposal, right? The system was set. And then we spent all of our time meeting that initial set of requirements that either we had come up with or that had been handed to us.
Which way creates a better product?
Well, I mean, I think that commercially you can move much faster if you're designing capabilities based as opposed to requirements based. And I think both can get to great and amazing products. It's really sort of the risk tolerance as you get to that process.
So, Chris, I want to pivot a little bit, maybe away from the more technical stuff. One thing that I
Sure.
think we hope for this podcast is to really get to know you, your journey, and like maybe people can learn something from what you've found very helpful in your life. I mean, oftentimes our failures are just as important in shaping who we are and where we're going. And I was just wondering, in your career journey, like, was there anything you look back on and think, man, I wish I hadn't done that? Or, and you don't have to answer both, but you could, or thank goodness I did that. Like, was there a decision in your life that you look back on as like divergent and you're either very glad you did it or you're disappointed you made that choice, you wish you could have redone it?
No, I mean I have had quite and I've had a very lucky career. I think like timing wise, project wise, a lot of things came together that was to some degree outside of my control. That maybe hustle or a little bit of networking sort of on my side sort of nudged things in the right direction. But no, I mean I've done everything from fly planes or train to fly planes in the United States Air Force to operate rovers on other planets and like make the decision, like one major decision when I was at NASA was like, do I continue on the path of not just being an analyst on the Mars operations team and like supporting the rover drivers and folks like that, or do I take this risk and this opportunity to go to JSC and help build the next robotic astronaut assistant?
Johnson Space Center.
That's Johnson Space Center in Houston. And so that was one of the first times in my career that I had to like make a decision. Like, do I keep doing this or do I take a risk and
Now, if I remember correctly, you had to break your lease with a roommate for that. And your girlfriend at the time was still living in California, who would later become your wife. Is that right?
that is true.
What
That is
made
true.
this decision? I mean, that's like a major decision you made in your life that was personally challenging. How'd that work out for you?
It worked amazing. I went to JSC, helped develop Centaur 2, which was this awesome little mobile robot base for Robonaut, which is was the upper body, was a humanoid upper body being developed at Johnson Space Center. That got extended. That tour of duty got extended to send Robonaut to the space station. I like inadvertently, I went from sort of flight tactical ops and low TRL robotic development to suddenly being in charge of refurbishing Robonaut's upper arms to go to the space station. So I got my first like taste of actual flight project, like development as opposed to the ops side. And then, I went back to JPL, was working on a lot of awesome things there when the DARPA Robotics Challenge came up. And because, I had made that decision 2 years before to go to JSC, the team at JSC called me up and asked me if I wanted to run their hardware team to develop Valkyrie.
And if I remember correctly, you had to break another lease with this roommate for that. Is that right?
That's
That
right.
must have been
That's
one of the
right.
hardest decisions of your life.
Yeah, we lost our LAN party room, but I
That's
guess
yeah. Speaking of regrets, I think we were never able to be at the top of Bronze League again after I had left to go to JSC that second time.
yeah, our team wasn't so good anymore.
The advantage of being in the same room, like they crumbled when we were in different time zones.
Go ahead, Timothy. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what accomplishment are you most proud of in your life so far, either professional or personal?
Oh, geez. I don't know. There's just so like I've built a lot of very awesome robots or helped teams make make systems that are like I could just dream about as a kid. But I think like professionally, um, one of the highs was when, I've generally been in charge of the hardware teams and sort of just interfaced with the software teams. But when I was leaving Valkyrie, some of the teammates there on the software team, you know, like gave me a heartfelt thank you. And I think that has been the highest professional accolades that I've ever gotten. Be like, yeah, I did do a good job. Thank you. Like, I mean, we did a good job, but that it really felt personal at that point.
That's awesome. Um, Now, founding a company, notoriously stressful, right? The fact that
True.
your spouse is also founding a company, the fact that you have two little ones under the age of 5, I think.
The oldest is 5.
Yeah,
That's right.
okay, the oldest is 5. How do you balance that? Like, do you have any advice for people who are looking to do something similar, or like what has worked for you, what has not worked, like just some thoughts on being a parent and staying close with your spouse while you're trying to do this? I think that would be a wonderful thing to hear from you.
Yeah. Let's just say this is the playbook is still being written on this for sure, but you have to be intentional, at least for me personally. Like, we're in a small company, so there's both sort of organizational responsibilities. There's individual contributor responsibilities that I have. And then there's, outside of work, there are parental and spousal responsibilities, and that they all need to be prioritized when, at the right time. So I do things like mark off my calendar so that people cannot schedule me to be in a meeting, so that our family has dinner every single night as a single unit. That was one of the things that my parents did that I, looking back on, very much appreciate. That there just wasn't a question on like where we were going to eat or who was going to be there. We were all there. We all sat down and we all begrudgingly talked to each other. And so we're trying to have that same experience with my kids. And then you just got to make time when you have to. And some of that is scheduling. Some of that is maybe there's less sleep than I used to get. And yeah, talk to me in a couple years when we've sort of at least put a pin in that draft of the playbook to see maybe what I would do different next time.
Yeah, since we've gotten to the invasive personal questions phase of the interview now, what kind of conversation did you have with your wife about deciding to do a startup? And what kind of conversation did she have with you before she started hers?
I had started a few companies in like sometimes they were part-time, sort of like side work. Like, let's me and a couple of friends trying to figure out how to do a product or a thing on the side. So it's always been part of sort of how I've operated, is that there's been a side, there's been some sort of professional thing on the side going on because we wanted to create something. And like my job wasn't filling every sort of taste or need that I had to create. And so there was never really a question of can you go do this, or should we go do this, or not. It was more like, could we afford to not have a salary for a bit, or to it was more of a logistical conversation
Okay.
than a can should we, or can we it was much more, those conversations were much more about logistics than is this the right thing to do.
Interesting. um well, I guess what I have a number of questions. I realize we're getting pretty long here on time, but I guess the one question that I have for most people at our age, right, where you're becoming a leader, you're moving into management, you're founding companies, you're not exactly where you want to be at the end of your career, And I think a lot of times people just feel uncomfortable taking that next step, pushing themselves, thinking they're the person to do something. They're the expert in the room. I know that's something that I've struggled with. I guess at what point did you feel confident in your own ability to lead or found a company, lead an entire robotics team, found a company, set a vision? Like, was there a moment that just triggered for you, or was it something over time?
No, I don't think there was ever a moment. Just like just sort of unwinding the question for a little bit. Uh, I've been super lucky in that almost every point in my career, w- I was like, where do I want to be in 5 years? And it's always been like what I'm doing right now, or very, very close to that. Um,
Somebody
and
might say that's
so,
not luck. Some people might say that's like a vision setting where you want to be in 5 years and then working towards it. But I won't be that person that calls you out.
incredibly comfortable. Well, that's actually the wrong word. I was never like incredibly comfortable with doing my job, what I was doing right now, but being comfortable with um, sort of where things were leading. Um, it always like there were no like step functions in it.
Hmm.
That through ROTC and the Air Force, they say that you should be technically and tactically proficient. And one of the I've sort of taken that to heart. Eternally grateful for a lot of the training that I got there, but because as soon as you are technically proficient, like whatever your actual, your day-to-day job is, and then tactically proficient, just like making good decisions and keeping your eyes up, on the horizon, like what do we need to do now to make sure that what comes next is the right thing. Like that just naturally, whether you are explicitly the leader of the team or not, that just moves you into that kind of leadership role. And I think just good things happen if it if you can lead uh from not, if your leadership comes not from a title but from just the way that you're doing your job, it's very natural then to step into a role where it's explicitly your job to do that. And so, yeah, I wish there had been some sort of master plan. I might have gotten to this point quicker. But yeah, I would just say, just like doing, you know, lucking into like awesome projects and awesome teams that were doing things that I wanted to do. And then, just taking that as far and as fast as I could sort of has just enabled me to maybe take risks that I might not have been able to take, if I hadn't been successful. It's like the old, oh, my dog is barking in the
Yeah,
background.
Charlie
Sorry about
agrees
that.
with everything you're saying.
Yeah, it's when your success begets success.
Hmm.
And so, like in sports, I think it's like in your career, one of the things that is helpful is just to get some wins under your belt. And if you get those early enough, then you sort of learn how to flex those capabilities in places that maybe other people are too scared to do that or are a little worried.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody starting out in tech or robotics now? And does AI change how people should think about their careers?
I think AI does, to some degree, change how people should think about their careers. I think it moves the bar from memorization and having this vast sort of um uh it expands your playbook of what you can recall, like data recall. So if I needed to if you need to figure out how to analyze something, like your ability to find out how to analyze that, I think, will be greatly expanded by AI, and through tools that can generate sort of a list of references on demand in a much more meaningful way than Google, has ever, the Google search was ever able to do. And so I think AI is going to change are sort of technical jobs in two ways. One is I think it makes soft skills and creativity even more. They've always been important, but it makes them even more important. It's like your ability to come up with and be willing to explore new ways of doing things and being able to like iterate extremely quickly on that and then share those ideas with the rest of your team or your customers. It makes that. And then also sort of diametrically opposed to that is the people who can be experts in like a domain so that we can check the AI, right? If you're always relying on a computer to do your thinking for you, like I think a lot of skills, whether we want to believe it or not, but they're perishable. Like most skills are perishable. And so getting a foundation, I think, in some technical field, and I'm biased towards like physical science, and I think it's going to be very, very valuable just from okay, I've checked what the AI said. This makes sense. Let's go try this wild and crazy idea. And I think those two things are going to be very, very valuable. So I guess that was the long way of saying go deep in something and get creative and broad.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, we like to end our shows with, first of all, thank you for your open conversation. One question we want to ask everybody is, are we technically friends? Would you say that you, me, and Timothy now are? I think we're technically friends. What about you?
I think if we look up paragraph 4 in section 8, it would say that we are indeed friends.
All right. Perfect. Really appreciate your time, your energy. I hope the audience found this interesting. We talked about the future of robotics. We've talked about the career journey, Chris, like the ups and downs of starting a company, the stress on life. Is there anything else you just wanted to add before we say goodbye that we didn't cover?
No, well, thanks for having me on. It's you've always been a great friend and StarCraft partner. We will, my plans for retirement are to become Bronze League heroes once again. And, it's something that we can all strive for somewhere in the future.
It's important to have life goals. That's
right. That's right.
All right. Timothy, any last thoughts, or we can say goodbye?
This is great. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers.